From one of Australia's former leading homicide detectives, this is I Catch Killers with Gary Jubelin.
The president tells you need to do this, you do whatever it takes to get it done and not get caught. You never see in James Bond coming back from a mission, sitting it down at his desk and spending 6 hours writing it up.
I Catch Killers with Gary Jubelin.
Today, we're going to take you into the spying game. We're going to be talking to someone who knows and understands this world better than... We're going to be talking to a former CIA operative who spent over 25 years with this secretive organisation gathering intelligence and conducting covert operations. Most of what we know about the workings of the CIA comes from spy novels or Hollywood movies. Well, today we're going to find out exactly what goes on in that shadowy world. Who are these faceless men and women who put their lives at risk in the hope of making the world a better place? Ric Prado, a former CIA operative, is going to tell us all about it because he was one of those faceless men. Have you ever had an operation where communications break down right at the critical time?
Several times, trust me.
Yeah,
we have a saying that 2 is 1 and 1 is none. So yeah, when it comes to communications.
Yeah, it's a familiar from my time in policing. I've got to say, we've had some very interesting guests on I Catch Killers, but we haven't had someone that's lived a life like you've lived. It's quite extraordinary what you've been through in your world that you operated in the CIA.
Yeah, I have to say that I've been a blessed individual. You know, I came to this country as an orphan immigrant, and this country adopted us, adopted me, and subsequently my parents when they were able to come out. So I developed that debt of honor very early on in my life, and shortly after high school, I went into the military, and from then on, eventually to the agency.
Yeah, well, that certainly comes across in your book, that the fact that you really believe in what you do. I should just clarify up front, because we are getting you from the United States, that the I Catch Killers name of the podcast, it's not in reference to the work you do at the CIA or other guests that we've had on. I was a former homicide cop for over 20 years, so hence the name I Catch Killers. So it's not a token on what the perception of CIA operatives get up to. So,
Well, we try to catch bad guys too.
yeah, we're all doing for the same thing. The type of work you did in the CIA, and we've had like undercover cops, I've had FBI cops on, and all the police I've worked with, whether it be tactical and different things. The type of work that you do, it's almost like pressure on steroids. Like the stakes are very high in the world that you operate in. Moral compass, I always found that in law enforcement, different people, it's important to hang on to a moral compass. When you worked in the CIA, I'm sure there was ethical dilemmas that you faced. How did you manage to navigate your way through that world?
Well, first of all, to address the first part of what you were talking about, I think one of the biggest difference, and I work with law enforcement, I'm a full member of our Fraternal Order of Police here, but remember that even when you guys are undercover, you're in your turf. You have 911. We don't. We only operate outside of the United States. To answer your second question, the moral compass was easy because I was blessed with really good leaders. Yeah. Individuals that groomed me, that appreciated what I was willing to do. So for me, navigating that was OJT. Most of the work that we have is on the job training. We have the farm that we go through that's formal, but after that, it's literally your senior operators guiding you through each step of the way. So
I think it's crucial in situations like you found yourself in to have that good leadership. You can't underestimate a good leader, and also mentors are very important in that world.
Yeah, that's something that I learned from my mentors, and I've tried to pay it forward by doing the same for a lot of our other guys.
Yeah. Okay, writing the book about the CIA, what motivated that? Because I'm sure you know the perception, it's a very secretive world, and I understand, having read the book and cover to cover, and I've got to say it is a great read. You took me right into that world. What was the motivation behind writing the book?
That's one thing that I never wanted a moniker that I ever dreamed of being in my name, best-selling author. That was never in my pocket. I always wanted to do something special military. I always loved the CIA concept of doing things, little that I knew about it. But I had several people, like one of my bosses, Kofor Black, was very instrumental in getting me to write the book because he felt, being a lot smarter than me, that I had a story, a life story that would help carry several messages at the same time. And the biggest message, or the first message, is that the agency is made up of honorable people, hardworking individuals, dedicated to the job, and it's nothing like is portrayed in the movies and in the novels. Don't get me wrong, we have our bad guys, just like you've had, I'm sure,
Yeah.
somebody in your midst that that you disagreed with or that betrayed you. But the primary reason was to honor my colleagues, which are all people that are dedicated to the mission, individuals that have the smarts and the backbone to go out and make big money, in private sector, other jobs, and they choose this kind of service.
Mm. And it's a service to the public, isn't it? Because the skill set that the operators have, it's certainly transferable to the private sector, and they'd probably make a lot more money. So there has to be something that's driving people to work in that field. With the you also, and I picked up, I'm not sure if it was in the book or one of the interviews that you've done, the fact that the CIA have been like a closed a closed organisation, and it in some parts does a disservice to itself because people speculate on what goes on. And I think a book like that, like I'm reading through the book and go, okay, well, how dark are we going to dive here? But you really explain it and the decisions that are made and the type of situations that you find yourself in.
Without a doubt. I mean, I think that you mentioned the moral compass from the very beginning. I don't think that anybody volunteers to do law enforcement work or military work, or in my case, agency work, without having a higher cause and a higher belief. So for us, that was the reason that I wanted to clarify. And you mentioned how bad my agency is about permeating good news. And that's
Mm.
something that I have actually tackled as many times as I could, that when there are things that we can say that we succeeded and no longer compromise sources and methods, that we owe it to the public to be able to get it out there. Contrast, the FBI, they could have Ruby Ridge today, and tomorrow they shoot Dillinger.
Yeah.
Well, we have a flap and it comes out and everybody knows about it, but I could, somebody could recruit Putin's secretary,
Yeah.
and we can't go out and say, hey, we just recruited Putin's secretary.
Yeah.
So it is a very ungrateful mistress when it comes to that.
Yeah, well described. I think the fact that the type of work that's done, and even in the book, you've taken us into the world without releasing too much of the methodology and understanding of it, but it hasn't given an advantage to the bad guys that people are chasing now.
Absolutely not. And as a matter of fact, my book was fully cleared by CIA for that very purpose. I wrote, as you saw in the book, there are many blacked out areas, things that they did not let me talk about, and I understand. I understand sources and methods.
Yeah.
But that was part of the process, a very lengthy process. It took me 6 months to get it past the agency, all approved, so I could actually then show it to my publisher.
Well, I think you came back very good with all the redacted parts. It wasn't too overwhelming. I thought you might have just had the heading and the rest of it redacted in the end. But yeah, they left a lot in the book, and it's been selling very well too, I believe. So
yes, it was a New York Times #8 bestseller list, and as of last count, it's sold over 90,000 copies. So it's doing okay.
So look at you now. We can call you the critically acclaimed author. Not only the CIA operative. Before we get into your life and your career, I just want to get a sense what the role of the CIA is. And if you could just break it down, because we see it, and basically the public's perception of it is seen in the movies or the spy novels. I get a sense of the type of work that you do being involved in law enforcement. Could you just explain to the public so they get a sense of what the role of the CIA is?
Well, first of all, and most importantly, we do not operate in the United States.
Yep.
We're forbidden to operate in the United States. So all our work is done overseas, which means that not only do we have to recruit people that are willing to go overseas, but they have to learn a language. We can never send somebody to a country that they cannot communicate, because that is that's so much a big part of our work. But the essence of the agency is to collect intelligence that benefits our country, to protect our people. Obviously, there is a second part of it, which is Black Ops. That's the title of the book.
Yep.
Which is covert operations, where the American hand has to be hidden. And that comes under Title 50 authorities that only the president gives the CIA. And I give you an example. When I was in Honduras at the very beginning of my career, living in the jungle there with the Contras, that was a Black Op program. I was there as a Honduran major, and there was no advertisement of the American hand, at least for the first 2 or 3 years. That was pretty sacrosanct. Later on, the same thing, operating overseas and having that view of how we do things, and protect it. Yep.
Okay, your childhood, which is fascinating in itself, and I think it was perhaps the driving force of the path that your life took in the type of work that you did. Could you tell our listeners about your upbringing and what happened there, and how that shaped you as a person?
Gary, I believe that God prepares us for our path, and if we have the fortitude of the backbone to follow that path, we will do well. I believe that even though it was very painful at the beginning, all the trials and tribulations that I did go through forged my mettle to end up being what I was able to do. I was a very happy kid in Cuba. My dad was a middle-class businessman. 1959, he owned a 57 Pontiac. We had a TV and a telephone, which was, even by American standards, I was solid middle class. And going from that, and within 6 months, seeing my parents destroyed, their business taken over, me wearing a uniform at the age of 7 or 8 or 9, that was quite a shock. Subsequent to that, my dad decided that we were going to leave the country for freedom, but my mom and dad couldn't get out at the same time. So a program that came from the Catholic Church called Peter Pan program, took out 4,000 some odd kids out of Cuba under the similar need. And I ended up in an orphanage in Pueblo, Colorado. Now, Pueblo, Colorado today is still a blue collar town. Imagine back in 62, it was a pretty rough learning experience. You get into an organization that has 3 or 4 different nationalities, 2 or 3 different languages, and a lot of pissed off kids, because nobody likes to be an orphan.
Yeah.
So I had to grow up pretty quick, from the nice life in Cuba where everybody was my friend, to making friends that would stick with you, and vice versa. So,
and with the leaving Cuba, what was happening at that time that made your parents think it's better to ship you overseas to a country they've never been to, you haven't been to, you don't speak the native language? What was it there that was occurring in Cuba?
Well, you have the Castro Revolution had just took place in January of '59. And though he was welcomed by the masses, including my parents, it became very obvious very shortly that he was a communist, and that he started confiscating not only foreign businesses, which was bad enough, but local businesses. My dad's coffee business was confiscated, and I think he hired 10 people. He had 10 employees. So it's not like we were, an imperialist company of some sort. But it was communism. It was the taking away of freedoms, the indoctrinations in the schools, telling us that if our parents spoke bad of the revolution, we had to turn them in. It was just that ambiance of fear that permeated. And my dad was a pretty tough guy. He was a cowboy before he was a businessman. Literally, he used to run my grandfather's ranch, and he was very good at making quick decisions, and he did. He says, "We got to get out of here." And I think the most important point is that we left Cuba for freedom.
Yeah.
We had a middle-class existence, and we came to the United States, and I will tell you that we were sub-poverty for at least the first 4 or 5 years.
Yep.
So it was quite a drastic change to my mom working in a sweatshop, sewing, my dad working 2 jobs. It was quite a change for us, but freedom drove it. And I think the point that you made is most excellent and very important to me. My parents are the ones that sacrifice. A lot of people go, "Oh, poor Rick, you had to go through." No. Imagine taking your only child and putting them on an airplane to a country that you may never even be able to visit
Yeah.
for freedom.
I can't even comprehend it, Rick. Like it's really, but I think that typifies the character of your parents to start with, but what was going on in your country and with the communists, that you've seen that throughout your career, and we'll break your career down, but you've seen that type of thing where it all looks fine when the new regime's coming in, the communist regime, but it doesn't always play out the way it's designed or sold in the first place.
Without a doubt. I mean, if you could name me one country that has thrived with communism, I will give you a prize. I mean, look at Venezuela, look at Cuba. The standard of living in Cuba was third in all of the hemisphere behind the United States, and I don't know what else it was, but so without a doubt, it is socialism is nothing more than a mask that communism wears to get into your skin. And the only people that benefit from communism are the leaders. And you could see that in Soviet Russia, some of the leaders had car collections that were worth millions of dollars. The Castros have millions and hundreds of millions of dollars that they've stashed away. So the people are barely eating. Cuba right now is going through a tremendous hard times, and the weather isn't helping. They're on their third hurricane in the last few months. But the people are suffering, but the nomenclature that runs it are not. And there's a joke in Cuba that if you see a house that has been painted in the last 10 years, you know that it's a party member.
Yeah, it's that obvious. But that's what the world has shown, and recent history has shown just what you've said. And it's interesting you say, show me an example, because there's not examples where it's gone well. Getting back to you, okay, you've got a bit of the cowboy in you. Growing up, you were reunited with your parents, but you were struggling, or when say struggling, they had to work hard to make their life in the new country. Where did your path take you? I know you found martial arts, which kept you out of trouble for a bit and gave you some commitment. But tell us about those early years, the adolescent years.
Yeah, I was lucky that my parents came out less than a year after I left. So other kids had it a lot worse than I did. But the one thing that I always have was parental love and parental guidance, and a great example from a mom and a dad. But I did start the martial arts when I was 15 years old. I was fascinated by it. I embraced it, and to this day I still train in different arts. But I did have a falling out of hanging out with the wrong culture. And what happened was, the experiences in the orphanage ingrained in me the fact that if I take crap from people, they're just going to keep giving me crap.
Yeah.
So my tolerance for people getting in my face was very, very short. So in school, I would hang out with mostly the tough kids. And I used to get good grades. I was always at least a B student.
Yeah.
But I used to get in trouble for fighting all the time because there were, again, different cultural things going on. The Cubans coming into Miami, the blacks trying to come out, the white population. That conflict was very alive and well when I was growing up. But that was a very short period. That was just a few years of hanging around with the wrong crowd. Most of those guys, as a matter of fact, the majority of those guys are either dead, in jail, or became police officers.
Yeah.
So, and I became a spy. So it was that kind of a growing up thing. That said, I realized very early on that I did have a debt of honor to the United States. And there's a small piece in the book where I was in my first semester of college. And these were the hippie years. This is 1970, 71. and they posted that tomorrow they were gonna take down the American flag and burn it.
Yeah.
And I said to myself, no, that's not gonna happen. But I didn't have any friends in college. I was fresh new, so I had to go back to my high school homies. And it was, I think, 5 of us and about 20 of them, and it wasn't much of a fair fight.
They didn't get to take the flag down?
No, they did not. As a matter of fact, they lost all their beads and T-shirts. But the thing is, though, and this was critical in my life. It may sound a little melodramatic, but I looked up, and it was a beautiful blue sky, and there's that American flag, and I realized that for the first time in my life, I had done violence for the right reasons.
Okay.
6 months later, I joined a special operations team called pararescue, which is the part of the Air Force special operations guys. And my goal was to go to Vietnam and keep fighting.
Okay. So, I see how you see that as a pivotal moment that you can. I think there's a pathway people often take, and I think a lot of people, when you talk about your friends, they either end up in jail, dead, or police, military, or whatever. Sometimes, if you like the excitement, and you find, okay, you can actually fight for the right reason. And I dare say what you felt there was, hey, this is all right. You can have the excitement of the fight, but you're doing it for the right reason.
Of course. And that I think that's what drives most of us. I mean, your profession included. Police officers don't go out to become popular. They do not go out to become millionaires. They go out because they want to serve. But, the action is the juice. The fact that you can come in and make a difference and save a life or wrong, right or wrong, that's a hell of a rush.
Yeah.
And doing it so, especially in the dangerous circumstances that we both our worlds operate in. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but you talk the juice, and I understand that you're chasing the excitement. That's what drove me at the start. But as you become a little bit more wiser and you see actually how it all plays out, and you see the impact of the things that you're doing and what you're looking at and who you're trying to protect, it sort of changes. Like the juice is the excitement at the start, but then you start to go on a path that you're doing it because you know it's the right thing to do.
Absolutely right. You're 100% right.
Okay, so you joined the military. You weren't too popular with your mum because the Vietnam War was still going on at that stage. You had dreams of ending up in there, but you got a bit. Your mum was a little bit pissed off, to say the least, when you signed up. But they let you go. But the war came to a conclusion.
Yeah, we still had the draft at the time, but my draft number was so high that my parents were happy because they knew that I was going to get drafted.
Yeah.
And at the time I didn't realize it, and I was kind of angry at my parents that they didn't understand that I wanted to do this. But then I realized they already had lost their son once, and now here he is, this idiot, going out and trying to get himself killed again. So now I understand a lot better, being a parent and everything else, what their angle was. But without a doubt, I mean, my whole thing was to go into pararescue, which I was lucky enough to make through hard work and determination. But that's what led me eventually to the agency.
Describe the pararescue, because that's people I don't think fully understand what that is, but that's high level paramilitary stuff. Yeah.
It is. It's part of the special operations community. You have your Navy SEALs that are a lot more known, Green Berets, and pararescue is one of 2 special operations forces that are the Air Force. The other ones are sister combat controllers. And the main job of pararescue is to go retrieve either downed pilots or special operations guys who get caught in the Netherlands. So our training is brutal. It is, as a matter of fact, we go through the same scuba school that the Navy. When I went through underwater swimmer school, all my instructors were SEALs, and at the time, only pararescue and SEALs had to go through scuba school in order to get your beret or your trident or whatever it was at the end.
Yeah.
So it was mountain climbing, parachuting, survival, obviously the scuba. But all as me, and of course the medical, we are combat medics.
Yeah.
Because you go get a team that is under duress and one guy's got a broken leg, you got to fix them before you can transport them. So we got pretty good at that, and I'm very, very, very proud that I joined pararescue because I think it made me a better man, and it was literally my venue into the agency.
Well, it certainly gave you a skill set that allowed you to do the work in the agency. You people would ask, okay, how do you get in the CIA? I think you made one application and it was sort of, I'm good for this. I speak Spanish, blah blah blah. I've done this, but you were rejected. Tell us the story, how and also why you decided to go into to that area.
Well, the thing was, I was having a blast in pararescue. I was jumping every other day. I was scuba diving once a week. I was doing, but there was no purpose. It was training for training's sake. And we knew Vietnam was over. A few months after I got my beret, Vietnam was pretty much done with. So I had this itch that I have all this training, but all I'm doing is getting more training and getting better at a training that I don't see the light at the end of the tunnel before I die to be able to actually do something. And we have a lot of people that post-Vietnam, they made a career and they never went to war.
Yeah.
It's what happens. So I applied, like you said, I applied to the CIA in 1974. That's right after the Vietnam, and there was huge attrition post-Vietnam War of both our military and our intelligence services. They were decimated. So the note that I got back basically said, thanks, but we're firing, not hiring, kind of thing. So,
okay.
So I stayed in the reserves, and I became a paramedic with a Miami Metro Fire Department. And that was great because that further honed my paramedic skills as a PJ. PJ is what they call a pararescue guys, as a parajumper. And it was that very thing that allowed me to get into the CIA. I applied again in 1980. I had changed reserves. I was now with a National Guard Green Beret unit. I was never a Green Beret. I was on my process to get that qualification also when the agency, this time they accepted me because Ronald Reagan had just taken over. And the first thing that he did was declare war on communism worldwide, including the Soviet Union, but definitely in our backyard. And when he made the mandate that the agency, was supposed to support the Nicaraguan Contras that were fighting the communist Sandinistas that were being buoyed by Cuba or by the Soviet Union via Cuba.
Yeah.
The attrition of the agency had been such that they didn't have a native Spanish-speaking paramilitary officer. They had great paramilitary officers. We have an incredible special forces. I did my first 11 years was with Special Activities Division.
Yeah.
But they did not have the native Spanish, and they had native Spanish speakers, but they didn't have the paramilitary training. So that's how that was my toe in the door.
You had the perfect combination. Now, for people who say, because the next 3 years, and I'll let you describe the next 3 years of the work that you did working over there. I got to say, I'm reading it, and I was cringing at the thought of what confronted you going in there on your own, and you had to use every skill set available for a person: negotiating skills, being able to befriend people, to lead people, to train people, and also your fighting skills that you had. So, tell us about that, because that is honestly just an absolute adventure. This is the type of thing that they do see movies about, that people, I'm thinking, who are these dudes that go in there? Tell us about it.
Well, it's I'm very proud of that period. And actually, they often ask me what is the best job I ever had in the agency. And it's hard because I had a lot of great jobs. But that one was very close to home, Gary, because you have to understand that now, as a 30-year-old man, I am helping freedom fighters fight the same monster that destroyed my first country.
Yeah.
So I did 3 years, a little over 3 years, living literally Monday through Friday in the jungles between Nicaragua and Honduras. For the first 14 months of that program, I was the only CIA officer allowed to go to the camps because it was still a black op. It needed the American hand needed, and I was there as a Honduran major. So it was the most rewarding time of my life. And people look at me and go, you spent 3 years sleeping in a jungle hammock.
Mm.
How'd you put up with that? I said, I was always thrilled. I was newly married. I'm married to the best woman in the world that had no problems with me leaving Monday morning at 4 o'clock in the morning and coming back Friday at midnight and spending the weekend and doing it again, because she also is Cuban. She also she lived under communism a lot longer than I did. So that period was very rewarding in that sense. The other part of it too is that the quality of the people that I was dealing with, we're talking primarily peasants.
Yeah.
And, every night after, because I'd be training them all day, whatever it was, and the night I would grab a cup of coffee and circulate with the different fires that were there, that people were warming up or whatever. And I would ask them, why are you here? And there wasn't a single one to say, well, I read Lenin and I don't believe in communism. No, It was like, they raped my daughter. Mm. They forced my son to conscripted to the military at the age of 15. They beat up my priest and burnt my church. It was all personal. Yeah. It was pure. These individuals had given up everything and were living in squalor. Because even with our help, you're still living in the woods. So it was very rewarding to know that what I was imparting on them, one thing they did not lack, they lacked training and they lacked logistics, but they did not lack conviction and courage.
Yeah, they had the heart for it. When you're actually assigned that operation, mission, whatever it would be referred to, can you just talk us through, like you're basically getting dropped in to meet with a group of people. They're fighting people, and they're fighting a just cause. They're passionate about it. There's a lot of mistrust in that environment. Whose side are you really on? Who is this person? I think they had some Argentine operatives helping out that they didn't get on with too well or didn't quite trust. Then Ric rolls up on his own, and hi guys, I'm here. Talk us through that. How did you build relationships? How did you work your way into that organization?
Well, first of all, I think that my street savvy, my street skills that you understand better than the average person came in very handy, because I knew when to be nice and when not to look like food. Yeah. So I had to stand my ground in many cases. There were 2 senior agency officers, and of course we had a station in Tegucigalpa, Honduras, and they were in charge of the program. But I had no training by the agency. I signed up on a Thursday, showed up on a Monday, and 2 weeks later, I was not Ric Prado anymore. I was Alex Mendez, given a blue passport and sent to Honduras. And my marching orders were, you have 2 colonels over there that are ours, do what they tell you. And when I got to the ground, they looked at me and they said, you're going to go to the camps, you're going to make yourself indispensable, you're going to gain their trust, do whatever it takes to win them over and get us to help them. So that was one of the reasons that we ran afoul of the Argentines, because the Argentines were there. And I give them credit that they supported the Contra program earlier on, minuscule. Yeah. Because believe me, what I saw the first 6 months that I was there was living in mud and squalor and malaria and leishmaniasis and everything else. But for them, it became a modus vivendi. They were getting per diem from the United States. I never saw an Argentine in a camp all the time that I was there. So, but for me, when I got to the camps and I could speak the language and I could outshoot any of the guys they had, and I could rucksack them there, and I could teach them communications and patrolling and hand to hand and all these things, you've been through training. Yeah. You admire your instructors. There's a certain loyalty that a good instructor earns when they're teaching their subordinates. And I still have friends from that era. I still have commanders that we stay in touch with because they knew that I was there for them. Well, and eventually, they figured out that I was not a Honduran, but they didn't care.
It's clear you gained their respect, and there was a lot of different little groups too. So it wasn't just win over one lot. You were moving from camp to camp. But I just found that extraordinary. And we haven't even touched on like the conditions, the physical conditions, like living in a jungle, like tough times. So I can understand why you look back at that and with pride, because it's something that not many people could do, but you seem to flourish with it.
Yeah, it's funny. I look back now at 73 and I go, what were you thinking? But immediately I know what I was feeling. And I think that that was what it was all about. I was finally making a difference. I was there helping people, which was what was driving my boat. And it was extremely rewarding. And it did launch my career because, again, part of the blessing was I was the only guy in the camps for the first year and a half of that time.
Yeah, yeah.
So my name was known to just about every division chief and back at CIA. Who is this guy? Kind of stuff. And so that I secured my career. I didn't have my college. I only had 2 years of college when I went into the agency, and to become an operations officer, uh, paramilitary and
Yeah.
case officer, you have to have a 4-year degree. So they actually sponsored me to finish my education at George Mason University, a very nice university in Virginia. And from there, I went to our farm, which is our master's in espionage.
Yeah.
That's where you learn the craft, a very
I
esoteric, counterintuitive
I
craft.
I
So
find it interesting. I look at that the 3 years that you spent there. It's almost like, oh, well, if he survives, he's got his credibility, and now we'll invest some time in. Just before we move out of that deployment, because you had 3 years, I found it interesting. You also, the people that you were supporting, they lost their lead, or one of the groups lost their leader. Two took over, and their moral compass had slipped. The power went to their head, and you had to rein them in. Can you just tell us that story and the circumstances there? Because I thought it was, again, it typifies the type of pressure you're under. Not only are you helping these people fight an enemy, you've also got to keep them in control.
yeah, well, one of my favorite commanders, Commander Suicida, which means suicidal. That should give you a hint why I liked him. Um, he was killed, and the guys that took over became cattle rustlers. I mean, they had more guns than the local Hondurans by that time. They had more guns than the local Hondurans did, and they started abusing. And as a matter of fact, the biggest and most egregious act that they committed was there was one sub commander who opposed them, and they tied him to a tree, raped his wife in front of him, and then shot him.
Mm.
That's the exception, not the rule. The majority of these people were good. So, being the only CIA guy at the camps, the local Hondurans looked at my boss and said, "Fix it," and I was sent to fix it. So I literally renditioned both these guys separately. Both tried to resist. It didn't work very well for them, and I brought them back to Tegucigalpa, where they were put under military trial and convicted accordingly.
Yeah. No, it's a fascinating time. Then you talked after you finished there that to be a CIA, a fully fledged member, I understand that you need tertiary qualifications like degrees. So they sponsored you to go to uni, and I'm probably describing this a bit roughly, but to polish you up a little bit, to give you the so you could work in any environment. That we know you can do the military stuff in the tough environments, but this is to polish you up so we can present you anywhere. Talk us through that process.
Yeah, it was a great challenge. Obviously, I did have a good upbringing, so I knew how to dress right. I knew how to do things. But for those first 3 years of the agency, I was a blunt object.
Hmm.
And now I am asked to be a surgical, very finesse individual that can, fit in as a diplomat or a foreign businessman. And so you have to be polished. And part of it is your education. My degree was intercultural conflicts. In other words, what pisses people off with each other, from religion to politics to everything in between. And I did very well at the farm. I was in top 3 of my class, but again, I had that motivation, And again, this is where my street experiences really helped. There was one particular vignette where this Asia expert was testing us on doing what we call dead drops. So you do a surveillance detection route. I mean, you're sure you're not being followed, and you lay down covert communications that are hidden in a branch or whatever the hell it was back then. It's all electronic now. And when I did my stint, the guy came over and said to me, luckily he was kidding, but he says, "I'm reporting you to the FBI." And I said, "Why?" He goes, "You've had prior training." And then he started laughing. He says, "Good job." But that's what it was. I was a street kid. I knew how to blend in. I knew I had that feeling and that confidence, and that really helped me tremendously. So it was a learning experience, a lot of writing. That's where one of the things you never see in James Bond books or movies is James Bond coming back from a mission, sitting it down at his desk and spending 6 hours writing it up. And by the way, I'm still waiting for my Aston Martin. I haven't gotten it yet. So it's very different than what people understand our careers to be.
But the tradecraft that you learn at the farm, are they the type of skills they put you through, like anti-surveillance and how to make a drop, as you said it? Is that the type of thing that they run you through?
Yeah, I mean, they run you through the gamut. I mean, again, our main job is to recruit foreign spies. So there's a very methodological, a system for doing that. The spotting the right individuals, developing them, recruiting them, running them, vetting them. That's all finesse stuff. And you're working undercover because you can't go into a foreign country, go, "Hi, I'm from the CIA," which they can't. So we have to live whatever cover we have. I worked 8 hours at the embassy, and then I went out and did my stuff on the side. So from recruiting to handling agents, that's all part of the training. Obviously, covert communications, photography, and like you said, tradecraft. Tradecraft is something that is so counterintuitive. The fastest way from point A to point B is a straight line. Well, for us, it isn't.
Yeah.
We have to take measures that assure us that we're not being followed and thus compromise ourselves and the agent or the person that we're trying to recruit. So there's a lot of that finesse in there. Our guys and gals are also trained in the paramilitary side of the house. I didn't have to go through that because I already had all that training. As a matter of fact, it was guys like me who would impart that on the students. But these college kids, they had to jump out of airplanes. They had to rappel out of helicopters, not because they were going to necessarily do that. And some have, but it was mainly, to test your mettle and to build your mettle. As you know, when you're going through that kind of training, it really forges your sword. So
to prepare them for what they might go into. With the tradecraft in the book, you've talked about situational awareness and the importance of that, and you had a system set up with a white, yellow, orange, red system. Talk us through that, because that, I think, gives people an insight. The fact that the system has been set in place gives you an insight that you are living life on the edge when you're operating undercover or covertly, and the consequences are high. Can you break down the structure of it? Because I thought it was a simple, and you need simple things in these complex situations, but a simple way of making sure you're aware of what's going on.
Absolutely. The color system was created by a retired Marine Colonel Cooper, and he started the first real viable gunfighting school for law enforcement and military guys. He was a big 1911 45 caliber guy, and he's the one that made these colors. And the colors are white, yellow, orange, and red. You should never be in white unless you're in bed with your wife. Period. Yellow is what you live in. It doesn't mean that you're paranoid. It means that you are aware. You get to a stop sign, you look in your mirror, you look at what excess you may have, you see what's going on, you're not surprised. When you go into orange is when you see something that you say, I'll give you an example. I'm driving down in the streets of the Philippines, and I see a car that is parked over there, the trunk is open, and the guy is fiddling around in the trunk. Well, most people go, "Oh, he got a flat tire." Well, I looked, he didn't have a flat tire. So immediately I go to orange where now I plan what I'm going to do if indeed it is a threat. And then red means implement. So if that guy brings out a tire iron and a tire, I go, there's nothing. But if he brings out an AK-47, I can run him over with my car, or I can do a reverse 180. I could do all kinds of things. But if you are caught on the X by surprise, chances are you're not going to make it.
Yeah.
So those colors are essential. Obviously, you know, as a 12-year paramilitary officer with CIA, my gun skills were pretty good. But I will tell you that awareness beats fast draw every time.
Yeah.
And there's a story that you alluded to in the Philippines, where we were there training the Philippine Special Forces guys in fighting the National New People's Army, who was a communist-backed insurgency that had killed Colonel Nick Rowe just a few months before I got there, et cetera, et cetera. And so we had a long day's work, and two Army captains, Special Forces of the Filipinos, two of my techs, and me and another case officer went to have dinner and a beer at a place. And when we walked out, the two military guys walked out, the two technical guys walked out, my friend walked out, and I walked out. And as soon as I walked out, I see these three guys standing there. They were talking, and when we came out, they got three abreast. They had their left hand in their pocket, and there's a modus operandi of a hit team called the Sparrows, and you could Google that.
Yeah.
It's very dramatic. It's a guy that we captured, and he showed what they did, and that's they pushed the gun. No, the gun was the grip safety was taped down. They did not carry a holster. All they did was with the left hand push the gun up, shoot you, put it back in, and walk off.
Right.
And everybody's looking at the dead person. When they start looking around, they were ghosts. So as soon as I saw those guys, the two outside with their left hands in their pocket, I went on operational mode. I drew my weapon. And taking that safety off was the loudest click, loudest noise I think I've ever heard, because you get tunnel vision, you get auto tour exclusion. And it was funny, you know, Gary, if you're a civilian or just somebody walking down the street and somebody points a gun at you this way, what's your reaction?
Yeah.
You're at least going to go, hey man, whoa, what's going on? These guys didn't even blink. They just looked at me and went like, okay, we'll get you next time. What I did not know, because you know it from your profession, tunnel vision, auditory exclusion is a big deal when you're under stress. My buddy had also seen them, and he had drawn his weapon.
Yeah.
He was a Vietnam vet, by the way. He was a two-tour Vietnam vet. And these guys just walked out. And I've used that in training with the police and in training with my guys, that I don't care if you're Annie Oakley or Wyatt Earp. If you're responding to a gun that's drawn on you, chances are you're going to get hurt.
Yeah.
And these guys saw two guns before their hands could push that 45 out. And I guarantee you, if they would have pulled those 45, they would have been shot before they got the guns in their hands. So a fast draw is always second to awareness.
100%. And the way that you describe that, and I can see it. If you're walking through with the blinkers on and you're not looking around, those type of things, you can become a victim to it. I think, I'm not sure if it's years of being a law enforcement officer, but I can walk into an environment and I can sense if there's a problem there, and it becomes instinctual. I think you've probably worked in that, looking for those type of situations, and sometimes you're just out and you're looking, you think there's going to be trouble here in a moment, or you can see something that's going not quite right. But living that life that you do, and we've got so much to talk about. We'll have a break in a sec, but I just want to ask you, does your paranoia kick in? Like, you've got your head on swivel the whole time, or did you have the ability to switch off and relax in the right situation?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's innate in us that we remain in yellow.
Yeah.
A perfect example is when I would go out to dinner, and my kids were small. Both my kids are former military now, but you know, when they were small, they knew exactly where Dad was going to sit in the restaurant.
Yeah.
And the older one would tell the little one, nope, that's where dad's going to sit, because I was going to have my back to the door. I mean, my back to the wall. I would know where was the bathroom, all this kind of stuff. And I am watching what's going on. But paranoia, I'm sure there's some people fall into paranoia.
Yeah.
And I've had people that reported things that never really happened, and it was all their imagination,
Yeah.
Especially with agents. But I think it's just going back to those colors. It's just a way of life. I drive every day, and when I get to this day, I'm a civilian now,
Yeah.
high profile, but I'm still a civilian.
Yeah.
I get to a traffic light, and first thing, I don't pick up my phone and start texting when I'm at that light. First thing I do is I look in my mirrors, and this is natural. I say almost subconscious.
Yeah.
And I look at it and go, there's a path there if I have to get off the X. And that's not paranoia. That's just the survival instinct that we have lost by civilization.
Yeah. It's fascinating. Well, Rick, let's take a break, and when we come back to part two, we've just scratched the surface of some of the stuff you've done. When we come back, we're going to delve deeper into the life of a CIA operative, and I'm really enjoying the conversation. We'll be back shortly.
I am too. Thank you very much.
Cheers.